So welcome to Decisions 2024. It's a pros and cons presentation on the state and the LA County ballot measures. But before we do, I wanted to mention a few things. One is, at your table where you signed in, there were two documents. There were actually three because there was a flyer about the next event. There's this booklet. If any of you didn't pick it up and you want to use it to mark up while you're getting the pros and cons presentation, you're welcome to do that. In addition, there's this flyer, and it has to do with all the voter information that you might need. So this, it just tells you what the resources are and things of that nature. Okay, so help yourselves when you can. Now, before I turn this over to Robbie Davis, I wanted to give a shout out to our Voter Services Committee. You know, we're quickly heading to the election, and the voter services people have been very busy getting out the vote, a really important aspect for making democracy work. They've conducted voter registration from high schools with the help of our interns to PCC and Cal State LA to senior living facilities. They were also recently at the Hispanic Heritage Celebration near Pasadena City Hall. And there was a door hanger project with one of our underserved neighborhood, for one of our, I'm getting tongue-tied, sorry, with one of our underserved community neighborhoods. And they did it 5,000 door hangers in partnership with POP. So I think that was really good. And these are both great examples of our goal for diversity. We have both generational diversity as well as cultural diversity exemplified just by the efforts this month from Voter Services. In addition, there have been candidate forums and pros and cons to assist our community with the information needed to make informed decisions. And another pros and cons will be today. Thank you to all of you workers, all of you committee people, for really your enthusiastic, engaged work over this time. Now, our events committee has provided snacks to you, a donation to defray the cost of the donation of the snacks. I keep missing that word. The snacks would be greatly appreciated. I just keep hung up on donations. Okay, so help yourselves when you can, and we'll get started. Now, we have a lot to cover today, so I'm not going to take a lot of time here at the podium. I would like to introduce at this point Robbie Davis, our pros and cons leader. Welcome, Robbie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Robbie Davis, and I'm in charge of the group of people who do the presentations on the ballot measures for all the local communities. We have a great set of volunteers, and we've already done, I think, 12 different presentations. We've got another 14 maybe to go. So we've already spoken to about 500 people, and so hopefully that we're giving out information that's going to be really helpful. So for those of you, I think there's a few people here in the audience who are not League members, just to remind everybody that the League's charter is to promote informed and active participation in the political process. We are a political organization, but we never support or oppose candidates or parties. And we do sometimes take positions on ballot measures. However, I am not allowed, nor is my team today, to speak about the League's position. This is strictly an educational session, but at the end I can give you the website where you can go to find out what the California League's position is on the various state ballot measures. So for today, our speakers are going to talk about the state and the county measures. We'll be talking about the details of each measure, what the the money effects are going to be, and the arguments for and against. And just want to make sure that you realize that these arguments that we're going to be talking about, they're not arguments that the League has thought up. These are arguments that we try to take almost verbatim from the supporters and opponents. And we don't try and check and see if what they're saying is true. We just say this is what they say, and you can make up your own mind about whether they're veracity or not. So we're going to go through the state and the county measures today because there's 13 altogether. What we're going to do is we're going to have questions after each one, but we'll only do, I think, 2 questions after each measure. And then if there's extra time at the end, people, if they have more questions about any of the measures, then we'll take additional questions. But we want to make sure we get through everything. And hopefully we can also help you follow the money and see who's paying for all those TV ads that you're seeing. So I'll start off with state measure number 2, Proposition 2, and it's a bond measure. And just want to do a little overview about bonds. Bonds are a form of long-term borrowing that local governments or state government uses to fund infrastructure projects. So bonds have to be spent for things like roads and bridges and schools and fire stations and things like that. Bond money can't be spent for administrative costs or salaries or things like that. So the bonds, the state would issue the bonds. They're sold to investors, and the investors get paid back with interest, usually over about 30 years. And the revenue to pay for state bonds comes from the state's general fund. And it generally costs about double the amount of the original bond issue to pay the bonds back over the 30-year lifetime. So anyway, we have a couple of bond measures on this ballot. So let's go ahead and start with Proposition 2. Then it is a legislative bond measure. So the first 5 propositions, 2 through 6, were put onto the ballot by the legislature. And so the subject of this is it allows the state to issue $10 billion, that's with a B, $10 billion in bonds to fund repairs and upgrades to public education facilities, all the way from kindergarten through community college. So the background on this is that California has about 10,000 public schools and about 115 community colleges, and almost 40% of the students in California attend schools that don't meet minimum standards. They have damaged floors, damaged walls, malfunctioning electrical systems, gas leaks. I mean, there are a lot of issues with our public schools. So local governments and the state generally share equally in the cost of school construction. So a local government, like the city of Pasadena, which we have a bond measure, local governments would pass a bond. If they pass the bond measure, then they would ask the state for matching funds from a state bond measure. So they kind of go half and half to do repairs on schools. The last state school bond measure that we passed was Prop 51 in 2016, and that was approved $9 billion in bonds. So the proposal, Prop 2, would authorize the state to issue $10 billion in bonds, and it would allocate the funds. 85% would go to public schools, including charter schools, and 15% would go to community colleges. There would be a portion of the funds that would be set aside for small school districts, and the states would pay a larger share of project costs in those smaller districts, and districts that have a higher percentage of students that are English language learners or foster youth or low income. And there's also about $115 million set aside to remove lead from school water systems. So the fiscal implications, that's the money. There's an office in Sacramento called the Legislative Analyst, and their whole job is just to look at all these different bills and measures and see how it affects money. And so the legislative analyst expects that it would cost the state about $500 million a year for 30 years to pay off these bonds. So again, it takes about double the amount of the original issue, which would be $10 billion. It would take about $20 billion to pay all these bonds off over 30 years. And then the effect on local government would depend on how many local bond measures they pass. So the supporters of Prop 2 include the president of the California Teachers Association, the California Federation of Teachers, and the California Chamber of Commerce, and they say that Prop 2 provides funding for outdated facilities that need repairs and upgrades to meet basic safety standards. They say that it has a strict taxpayer accountability. Okay. Strict taxpayer accountability provisions, and it protects local control because these funds can only be used for projects that were approved by local government, local voters, with their local bond measures. The opponents include the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and there's a state assemblyman that signed on as well against this, and they say that California already has $109 billion of outstanding and unissued bonds. They say that Sacramento politicians overspend, then they issue bonds, and then they punish us with tax hikes. And they say that we should tell politicians to prioritize education over giving free health care for illegal immigrants. So the question is, should the state issue $10 billion to fund public school repairs and upgrades? As far as the money, about $5.6 million has been collected so far in support of Proposition 2, and this has come from education groups, and there has been no money dedicated or collected for against this measure. So any questions? The question is oversight included in this? And yes, it is. There are bonds that they're out there, but no investors have bought them yet. So they're sitting there, and I guess no one has, and there has been no project that is appropriate for what the bonds were issued for. So, okay, well, one more question. Yeah, I'm sure, because that again is a safety thing, so I would guess that. So if we have more questions on this, we can hold them till the end and then we'll answer them. So next up we have Proposition 3, and that's Hannah McLaren of our speaker team.
Good morning. Let me see if I can pull myself down to the short person speaker. This is State Measure 3 on the ballot, and it's a constitutional right to have marriage legislative as a constitutional amendment. And this will amend the California Constitution to recognize the fundamental right to marry, regardless of sex or race. It removes language in the California Constitution stating that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So the question is, should the California Constitution be amended to define marriage as a fundamental right for all in accordance with the law? The way it is now, California has a civil right to marry regardless of gender or race. However, the state constitution contains an outdated and unenforceable provision stating only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. So this would repeal that outdated language and amend the state constitution to read, and this is only part of it, the right to marry is a fundamental right, period. As furthering the rights to enjoy life, liberty, safety, happiness, and privacy, and the rights of due process and equal protection, the legislature placed this measure on the ballot to bring the California Constitution in line with existing law that gives same-sex couples the right to marry as set forth by the Marriage Act. So if this passes, the proposition would take out the unconstitutional part of the California Constitution that limits marriage and put in words that say the right to marry is a fundamental right. This will allow marriage no matter what someone's gender, sexual orientation, or race is. So this is one key proposition, one key part of it. Opponents, there are opponents. We'll get the opponents first and I'll hear from the supporters. The opponents say that because same-sex marriage is already legal, the amendment fixes a problem that does not exist. Okay, interesting idea. The amendment's language is unclear and eliminates all rules for marriage. The amendment centers family life around the desire of adults rather than the rights of children who do best when raised by a married mother and father in a traditional family structure. And their last point is, without safeguards such as age, genetic relationship, and the number of participants, the amendment opens the door to child marriage, incest, and polygamy. That comes from the California Family Council. Supporters say there's no guarantee that marriage equality will remain the law. The amendment proactively protects against future attempts to restrict marriage rights for same-sex or interracial couples. The supporters say the amendment aligns the state constitution with the law as it is today and reaffirms the freedom to marry as a fundamental right. And lastly, the amendment does not change any laws regarding age requirements, the number of people in a marriage, or existing rights of clergy to refuse to perform a marriage. So this is the simplicity of it. If you vote yes, then it will get changed.
The supporters include the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the NAACP. And the opponents include a group called the California Family Council.
Thank you.
And as far as money, there's been about $3 million collected, and that's from Planned Parenthood and the California Nurses Association. There has been no money donated in opposition to Prop 3. So if there's no more questions, we have Jean Bunagel to do Proposition 4.
Good morning. Okay, this is also a legislative bond measure. So as Robbie explained earlier, this is borrowing money to put into effect, allowing the state to issue $10 billion in bonds for water, wildfire prevention, and protection of communities and lands. So the background of this is that according to a recent poll by the Public Policy Institute of California, most Californians say climate change is a serious threat to their quality of life and California's future economy. They believe that climate change has contributed to the state's extreme weather events. It is also to be known that California, has long been a leader on environmental issues, and voters have supported the legislative efforts to protect our environment and combat climate change. In the past decade, the state averages spending about $13 billion a year on natural resources and climate activities. About 15% of that comes from bond issues. So, hold on. Right now, let me see. So the proposal would authorize the state, we said $10 billion in bonds. The money would be allocated approximately for $3.8 billion would go to protect water supplies and quality. So, again, we're talking about taking things out of the water that don't belong in there. Reducing flood risk and improving stormwater management, protecting our rivers, lakes, and streams. $1.5 billion would go to improve local fire prevention and reduce the risk of wildfire. That would include clearing vegetation, thinning trees, and helping homeowners who have to clear areas around their homes to make it safe. $1.2 billion would go to coastal and flood management associated with sea level rise. $1.2 billion would go to biodiversity protection. which generally means conserving lands and protecting, fish and animals. The remainder of the funds would go for clean air and clean energy, which includes wind turbines out off the coast, and help with situations in which there's extreme heat and people have to be protected or aided in some way. And it would also go to agricultural land sustainability, which includes supporting farmers to reduce water use and providing things like transportation for workers to get from one agricultural area to another. Okay, fiscal implications. Okay. Sorry, this is my first time trying to keep this. The legislative analyst expects the sale of the bonds would cost about $400 million annually for 40 years. This is actually a small percentage of the yearly budget for those of you who buy groceries. However, the funds should reduce the amount of damage from natural disasters, and therefore future expenses spent on mitigating disaster should be lowered. So things are expected to even themselves out a little bit. Supporters include the Clean Water Action Group, CAL FIRE, which is the state firefighters group, Nature Conservancy, and the National Wildlife Federation. They say California faces growing threats from natural disasters, and the right investments now could help prevent future damage and costs. California is already paying a price for failing to prepare for climate change, and we need to shift from disaster response to disaster prevention. Prop 4 makes efficient, sensible investments in proven solutions. Opponents, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and State Minority Leader Brian Jones. They feel that clean drinking water and wildfire prevention are necessary, but should be funded within the current state budget. Prop 4 provides funding for unproven technologies with no evidence of success. And I have to interject in that one of the things that the money is going for is to take like the PFAS stuff out of the water. And it's true, some technology needs to be still developed. But anyway, Prop 4 lacks fiscal accountability or standards for measuring success. But there is a committee that's supposed to watch over it. However that happens. I think that's it. Questions? Billions. With a B. Oh, I'm supposed to say a vote yes. Sorry. Supposed to conclude with a vote yes means you want the bonds to be issued, and no means you do not.
Okay, our next, if there's no more questions or whatever, our next presenter will be Hannah McLaren on Proposition 5.
To answer the question about, this is going to really fry your idea about bonds. This is a legislative constitutional amendment that is being proposed with a simple majority needed to pass. Okay, it allows local bond measures for affordable housing and infrastructure to pass with 55% of the vote rather than the current 2/3 vote requirement. It will apply to some bond measures on this ballot. My driver asked, why 55%? Why not just a majority? And the background behind that is because when they did a study to find out what would be a reasonable level, it turns out that most bond measures receive 55% or more, but they don't get to 2/3. So they are therefore defeated. And it's a high issue, and we'll find it if this goes into effect, it would affect things like the library bond issue. Okay, which is probably the easiest one to pass with 2/3, knowing Pasadena and all the rest of us who get to vote on that one, except for maybe the congenital naysayers that exist. But anyway, what this does is it allows local bonds, okay, this is the key thing, not all bonds, but bonds that are local for affordable housing and public infrastructure with a 55% voter approval. So this is really a critical thing. It's to pay attention to what is being put on the ballot. This will allow the approval of local infrastructure and housing bonds for low and middle income Californians, and there are accountability requirements with it. The fiscal impact, let me deal with this one. The simplified question is, this will now allow local bond measures to fund housing for low and middle income Californians, or for public infrastructure, including roads, water, fire protection, to be approved by this lower percentage. The bonds must include specific accountability requirements, including a citizens oversight committee, annual independent financial and performance audits. It would also allow local governments to assess property taxes above the 1% assessed value to repay the bonds. And I'm sure now everybody, as we listen to these bond qualifications, it's assessed value, not your current value of your house. And assessed value is what was the price that you bought the house at, or the parcel at. And that makes a difference. I learn something new every day. That was the first time I've heard that. I mean, I knew that it was a much lower rate, but it is based on what the county assessor says. And that should, for those of you who are going through that can be negotiated with it. So it's not a hard and fast fixed price. There's a certain amount of wiggle room in that that's available. The background for this, of course, is Prop 13, which you are probably all familiar with. This was passed in 1978. It's amazing how long it's stayed. It decreased property taxes by limiting the rate of taxation to 1% of the assessed value of the property. It required a 2/3 majority in local elections for local governments wishing to increase special taxes. A special tax is a tax devoted specifically for a purpose. For instance, homelessness or road repair, money that does not go into the general fund. Although there have been numerous modifications to Prop 13 over the years, these two provisions still stand. So this would eliminate that balance. Currently, in a typical California, for housing in California, it costs around twice the national averages, and renters typically pay more for housing than in other states. There are certain government housing programs to assist specific groups, such as people with disabilities, low-income families, or the chronically homeless. But overall, there's still a massive shortage of affordable housing in California. So this would enable locales to create a bond that would ultimately support affordable housing projects. It could be, the money could be used by nonprofit groups, of which there are now an increasing number, of affordable, to sponsor and take over the building of these sorts of facilities. Places like Habitat for Humanity would be another kind of example of a beneficiary of this sort of proposal that's available. The fiscal effects is that the lower voter approval requirement would result in an estimated additional 20 to 50% of local bond issues being passed. This is based on the results of previous elections where the yes vote was greater than 55%. Supporters' arguments are, it gives local jurisdiction more control over their own affordable housing and infrastructure needs. It shifts decisions away from the state government, which has been too slow and unable to address the critical needs of individual communities. It does not raise taxes. It just gives voters more power to address the unique needs of their communities. And Prop 5 has accountability, transparency, and oversight features to ensure that the programs being funded truly deliver results. So this is known as Pay Attention to Your Local Government Day. The opponent's argument says it makes it easier for cities and counties and special districts to increase property taxes to pay for California's already massive debt levels. It allows state politicians to cover up their mess by shifting the cost of programs to local taxpayers. Its definition of infrastructure is too broad and will make everything in California more expensive, thereby worsening our already high cost of living. Those are the opponents. The opponents, as people or individuals, is the California Association of Realtors, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the California Chamber of Commerce, the California Republican Party. And as of August 2024, 27 million has been donated in opposition to Prop 5 by the California Association of Realtors. Supporters of the arguments, no, we've done the arguments already. The supporters of this are the California Professional Firefighters, League of Women Voters of California, California Labor Federation, the California Democratic Party, and as of August 2024, no financial contributions in favor of Prop 5 have been reported. Are there any questions? Yes? No, because this is local. Which, are you talking about the state general plan? The county's general plan? I don't think so. I think that, no, it really is local. Hypothetically, I could imagine that a local jurisdiction could develop a bond that would have that included in it, but it would have to be, it's not automatic, I think. No. You're welcome. Any last question? Comment? 55. No, not 55. 2/3, is that what I meant? No. 2/3. That's the old, currently it is 2/3. Yeah. If this passes, then it requires 55%. A majority. Yeah. Not a majority. Yes, at a local level, and it gives at a local level. For this very specific sort of thing, it doesn't go for everything. It's housing and infrastructure.
Okay, let's go on to Proposition 6, and that will be Jean again.
Okay, I'm going to preface what I have to say by reading a piece of the 13th Amendment of our Constitution, not California's, our country's Constitution. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Right now, California's Constitution is a mirror image of that. So, a constitutional amendment has been placed on our ballot by the legislature to amend our California Constitution to make involuntary servitude unconstitutional, even in prison. It removes the current constitutional provision allowing jails and prisons to force incarcerated persons to work or face punishment. So, right now, our Constitution bans involuntary servitude unless you've been convicted of a crime and you're in prison. So, this means forcing you against your will. About 1/3 of the people in state prisons and county jails work. The people in prison and jail can be required to do work or other activities such as taking classes. And hold on, I had other information on that. So, hold on one second. Some of the jobs they do are things like that keep the jails running, things like cooking, cleaning. They also help fight wildfires by cutting fire lines and trimming vegetation. So it is to be known that many of the workers are paid less than $1 an hour. Working as firefighters can actually earn them up to $10 a day. Consider that. They can also earn time credits that reduce the amount of time they serve in prison or in jail. So people who refuse to work or do other activities can face consequences, such as losing the ability to make regular phone calls. And just as a little piece of information, other states, Alabama, Louisiana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont, I thought there was one more, voted on ballot measures to repeal this kind of language, the involuntary servitude. Think about the names of those states. So the proposed fiscal effects. The fiscal effects of this. Now this is kind of up in the air stuff. So the proposition as it is says that the incarcerated workers, number one, have to volunteer. Number two, they do not have to be paid minimum wage. However, courts can require that minimum wage be paid. So we don't know how much this is going to cost long term. And the other issue that happens is right now people are forced to do these jobs that actually keep the jails running. So what happens if they don't want to do those jobs? Does that mean that more money has to be offered? That would cost the state more. If it means that time off from your sentence is offered, then that could actually be a state savings money. We don't know how people are going to react to this law, to this change in the Constitution. It says any potential increase or decrease in state and local criminal justice costs likely would not exceed tens of millions of dollars annually. And while that sounds like a lot, it says it's less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund budget. So, the proposal, it says Prop 6 changes the California Constitution to ban involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. It also bans the state prisons from disciplining people who refuse to work. However, it does not stop prisons from giving people time credits for working. So, supporters include a couple of state senators, Stephen Bradford, Lola Smallwood Cuevas, and Lori Wilson, California Labor Federation organizations, the Democratic Party, the ACLU, and notably the California Black Legislative Caucus, who recommended this because it's part of the reparations package that they asked for from the state. The supporters' arguments are involuntary servitude is an extension of slavery. There's no room for slavery in our Constitution, which should reflect our values in 2023. Prop 6 prioritizes rehabilitation for incarcerated people. They should be able to choose jobs and shifts that allow them to continue their education, use the law library, get counseling, and participate in other rehabilitation programs that facilitate growth and transformation. More than 94,000 Californians are currently enslaved in state prisons, and African Americans count for 28% of the prison population, despite making up less than 6% of the California's overall population. Although no courts explicitly order forced labor as part of criminal sentencing, it is standard practice to force incarcerated people to perform labor. Hold on, I'm missing my against it. There are no opponents. No opponents, that's what I thought. Okay. No opponents. So questions? Well, incarcerated is better. Yeah, that's better. Okay.
It was voted on recently in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, Vermont, and Louisiana. It was successful in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont. Louisiana voters rejected it. So Louisiana still has incarcerated people may be forced to work. Yes, the person. I don't know if the provision has to do with at the time of sentencing. All I know is that it allows the prison to either pay them monetarily or give them time credits. So they can do either one, and the prison itself or the jurisdiction, like the county or whatever, will make that decision, I guess, about how the prisoner is to be get repaid for their work. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to hold till the end. Okay, so now we're going to propositions 32 through 36, and all of these were put on the ballot through the initiative process. So everybody signed petitions or whatever. And so Proposition 32 has to do with California's minimum wage. So our minimum wage, the statewide minimum wage right now is $16 an hour. This is the third highest in the United States, but we also have the third highest cost of living in the United States. There are some groups of California workers. Examples are fast food workers, healthcare workers, or workers that work in cities with their own minimum wage that already have higher minimum wages than $16 an hour. So this measure would affect people who don't live or don't fall into one of those categories. It's been an interesting study by MIT, back east. They have a living wage calculator, and they estimated that a single adult without dependents in California would need to make over $27 an hour to meet basic needs. So the proposal for Prop 32, for employers that have 26 or more employees, it would raise the minimum wage to $17 an hour for the rest of this year. And then starting in January of 2025, it would raise the minimum wage again to $18 an hour. For employers that have 25 or fewer employees, it would raise the minimum wage to $17 an hour beginning January 1st, 2025, and then it would raise it again January 1st of 2026 to $18 an hour. So starting in 2026, everybody would be making $18 an hour, and then it would be adjusted after that annually for inflation. And again, in any jurisdiction or group that already has a higher minimum wage, this doesn't do anything to that. All those things just stand. And it also does not apply to independent contractors. So the fiscal implications of this, the legislative analyst says that it's all over the place. It could push up, or it would push up wages for other workers. It would increase business costs, and it might decrease profits, and that would reduce California income tax revenue. Might push the number of jobs up or down, they don't know. And government costs could go up because they would be paying their employees higher wages. But if there are more people who are earning a better salary and don't have to enroll in things like Medi-Cal, then the state's expenses would go down. So overall effects are uncertain. The supporters include, the main supporters, a gentleman named Joe Sandberg, who is an entrepreneur and an anti-poverty activist, and then also a U.S. Representative, Nanette Berrigan, and they say that Prop 32 will improve the standard of living for millions of Californians. They say it's going to improve the economy by increasing the amount of money that people have to spend on rent and food and things like that. And it will also reduce the burden on taxpayers who are subsidizing large profits for big corporations. The opponents include the California Restaurant Association, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Grocers Association, and they say that Prop 32 will hurt businesses, especially small businesses that have very small profit margins. They say that it's going to result in higher prices and loss of jobs, and they say that it will increase government expenses since governments are going to have to pay higher wages. So the question is, should California's minimum wage be raised incrementally to $18 an hour by 2026 and then be subject to raises based on inflation after that? So the yes vote, the money, the gentleman that I mentioned, Joe Sandberg, he has contributed $11 million of his own money in support of this. And $65,000 has been donated against by small businesses and grocers. So minimum wage. Any questions? Okay, yeah, she said just to know that Pasadena, city of Pasadena has a minimum wage of $17.50 an hour. Yes, does not apply to independent contractors. So if you hire somebody, I don't know, to clean your house or whatever, this does not apply to that.
What if you have a company?
If you have a company, then again, if it has 25 or fewer employees, or 25 or 26 over, so yeah. Okay, let's get on to the really fun ones. 33. Okay, 33 and 34. Both of these were initiatives put on the ballot by people signing petitions. 33 is about rent control. So as you know, we have a severe shortage of housing. And in the 70s and 80s, a lot of cities enacted rent control laws. Landlords didn't like this. And so in 1995, they pressured the legislature to pass something called the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. And what that did was severely limited what kinds of rent control local governments could do. So there's no rent controls allowed for single-family homes, and no rent controls allowed for any housing built after 1995. So this has been in effect since 1995. We tried to repeal it in Prop 10 in 2018. That failed. Some California cities do have rent control laws, but they have to fall under the rules of Costa-Hawkins. So Pasadena has rent control. There's a lot of cities around, about 1/4 of Californians live in areas that have rent control. So Prop 33, the proposal is it would totally repeal Costa-Hawkins. And so the state could not limit the ability of cities or counties to pass rent control laws. But it would have no effect on existing laws. So this wouldn't change anything in Pasadena's law or Los Angeles or Santa Monica's or whatever. Those rent control laws would stand. The fiscal implications of this would depend on what rent control laws were passed by local governments. So more tenants could be housed. There might be lower tax revenues if there was a decline in rental property values. That might mean less money for schools. There might be a slowdown in construction of low-income housing, or rental housing in general, if people thought that it was not going to be profitable. Landlords could sell their rental properties or convert them to condominiums. So there's all kinds of possible effects. The supporters of Proposition 33 include the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, remember that name, the California Nurses Association, and the ACLU, and they say that Prop 33 lets governments enact rent control to protect renters, and so they can stay in their homes. They say that 33 allows local governments to set policies based on the unique situations of their community, and they say that billionaire corporate landlords are making big profits from the lack of affordable housing. The opponents include the California Small Business Association, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Senior Alliance, and they say that Prop 33 could increase housing costs and make the crisis even worse because it would block new affordable housing being built. They say that it would eliminate existing homeowner and renter protections, and it would reduce home values. So the question is, should Costa-Hawkins be repealed and allow cities and counties to enact their own rent control? The yes side has collected $31 million, and that has basically all come from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. The no vote has collected $56 million, and this has all come from the California Apartment Association. So, moving to 34, and you'll see, sure. The opponents include the California, and these are the people that have signed the arguments in the ballot thing. The Small Business Association, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Senior Alliance. Those are the opponents. The Pasadena measure has to comply with the rules in Costa-Hawkins. Yeah. So it's because that Costa-Hawkins would go away, the Pasadena would not. Any existing rent control law would stay. And yes, unless we decide to change it. Okay, but let's go to 34 and you can kind of see how these kind of work together. So Prop 34, again, was an initiative, and it has to do with spending of prescription drug revenues by certain healthcare providers. So you're like renting prescription drugs, so let's see. So there's something called the Federal Drug Discount Program, and that provides discounts on drugs to certain healthcare providers. And they have to be nonprofits, and they have to be focused on serving low-income people. So the intent is to enable the nonprofits to be able to serve more people, but there's no federal or state law that restricts how nonprofits can spend any revenue that they get from selling the drugs at a higher price than what they purchased them for. So they get them at this lower price from the federal government. They can sell them at a higher price, and then whatever the profit is, they can do whatever they want with it. Okay, so the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is a major nonprofit healthcare provider, and they participate in this federal drug discount program. And the AIDS Healthcare Foundation runs a thrift store. In addition to providing healthcare, they run a thrift store, and they also have a lot of multifamily housing units, and I think these are mostly for lower income. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation has channeled over $100 million in recent years to fund ballot measures in support of rent control, like we saw just Prop 33. Okay, and so there's another whole little thing about Medicare, Medi-Cal RX that has to do with paying for drugs. That's just kind of a side thing. I'm just going to stick to the main part of Prop 34. So Prop 34 would require any healthcare provider that, number one, has spent more than $100 million in the past 10 years on anything but healthcare, and two, runs multifamily housing with more than 500 health and safety violations. It would require any healthcare provider that meets those two criteria to spend 98% of their revenue from the federal drug discount program on direct patient care. So, any guesses as to how many healthcare organizations in California meet those two criteria? One. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation. So this measure is pretty much targeted at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation to prevent them from putting any more rent control things on the ballot. So if a healthcare provider, if any healthcare provider, and the name AIDS Healthcare Foundation appears nowhere in this measure, but if a healthcare provider were to violate these rules, they could lose their tax-exempt status, they could lose their license, and they could lose any state contracts or grants. So the fiscal implications of this, the legislative analyst says that they could be millions of dollars have to be spent to enforce these new rules. But they say that whoever the entities are that did the violations, they would probably have to pay the cost. So the supporters of Prop 34 are the California Apartment Association and the Republican Party. They say that Prop 34 requires abusers of the drug discount system to provide health care according to their original mission. And they say that Prop 34 will require the designated health care providers to use 98% of their taxpayer-generated revenue on their main mission, which is direct-to-patient care. The opponents of 34 include the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and a group called the Coalition for Economic Survival, and they say that Prop 34 is an attempt by the California Apartment Association to harm a specific healthcare provider that supports rent control. They say that Prop 34 weaponizes the initiative process so that no organization in the future is going to be safe from retribution. And they say that, I guess that's the last one anyway. So the question is, should certain healthcare providers be required to spend 98% of revenues from the federal discount drug program on direct patient care? The yes on 34 has raised $29 million, and that has all come from the California Apartment Association. And about $5.6 million has been raised in opposition, and that's come from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. So questions on 33/34? Okay. I don't know of any. You mean if we were to change the rent control laws? I don't know if that would have. I don't know if any. She wanted to know if there's been any studies that dealt with the effects of Prop 33 on the unhoused, and I don't know of any study. Okay. The question is, what percentage does the AIDS Healthcare Foundation? I don't know that I have a percentage. All I know is that, again, they've spent over $100 million over the past 10 years on putting these rent control measures on the ballot. So, but I don't know what percentage that constitutes. Okay, any more on 34? So, okay, let's move along. So let's go to Prop 35. Prop 35, again, is an initiative. It has to do with permanent funding for Medi-Cal services. So California has Medi-Cal, which is our version of Medicaid, and it provides health care coverage to eligible low-income residents. The state currently imposes a tax on health care plans. So like HMOs and things like this, they pay a tax, and that helps to cover Medi-Cal expenses. That tax right now is not permanent, and it will expire at the end of 2026. And so this revenue is used, it's matched with federal funds, and it helps pay for Medi-Cal services. And the amount of a tax is based on the number of people that the health care plan covers. And the tax revenue, it reduces the amount of money that the state has to spend from the general fund. And the money is used again to raise payments for doctors and to other Medi-Cal providers. So Prop 35 would make this tax permanent, the tax on the health care insurance plans. But this would require approval from the federal government before this actually went into effect. And it would require that the tax revenues be spent only for specific kinds of services like primary and specialty care, emergency care, mental health care, prescription drugs. So there's a list of things the money has to go to. And it would prohibit the use of these revenues to replace existing Medi-Cal funding. So they couldn't say, well, we're going to get this tax, therefore we can cut from this other pot. No, you take whatever the existing Medi-Cal funding is and then add this tax revenue onto the top of it. And it also has a cap on administrative expenses, and it requires audits. So the fiscal implications, nothing's going to happen through 2026. And then starting in 2020, that's when the original or the existing tax expires. Starting in 2027, there would be increased funding, which they think would be somewhere for Medi-Cal between $2 and $5 billion a year. So the long-term fiscal effects are really not known, but some of it would depend if this does not pass, if the legislature would continue to approve the existing tax and re-up it in 2027. So those are the implications. The supporters of Prop 35 include the Democratic Party, here, strange bedfellows, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So both support this, as do many healthcare providers. They say that 35 protects and expands access to health care for millions of Californians, provides dedicated ongoing funding without raising taxes on individuals. It improves access to primary care, and it includes strong accountability measures. And no arguments in opposition have been presented. And about $50 million has been donated in support of this. So the question is, should the existing tax on managed health care programs be made permanent to provide revenue to fund Medi-Cal? Questions on that? I would think so, but that's a good question. If they have a big health care plan, somebody in the back is nodding yes. So. Okay, so yes, he said some of the big insurance companies do have managed care plans, so they would be covered. Okay. It was. You know, I don't know who the signature gatherers were. I don't know who paid for this. I probably should look that up, but I would guess probably healthcare providers that don't feel they're being compensated enough for Medi-Cal services, but that's just a guess. So let's go on to number 36. 36, another initiative. It has to do with changing sentencing for certain crimes. So again, we have two kinds of crimes. Basically, we have misdemeanors and felonies. Misdemeanors are less serious. You get like a fine or less than a year in county jail. Felonies, you get more than a year in county jail or you go to state prison. In 2014, we passed Prop 47, and that was supposed to reduce the state's prison overcrowding. And prior to that, the state of California prisons were at 140% of capacity. And this actually went all the way to the US Supreme Court, and they ruled that this is cruel and unusual punishment, and they ordered the state of California to reduce overcrowding. So we passed Prop 47, and that changed some crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, which resulted in people getting out of prison. So since 2014, the prison population has been reduced, and we've saved about $600 million, and that money has gone to a state fund that for rehabilitation of incarcerated people and also some victims services. However, in another data point, since 2014, there has been a marked increase in organized retail theft, like smash and grab robberies, and shoplifting has gone up. And they have done some studies, and they can't prove that Prop 47 was the cause of the increase in crimes, these kinds of crimes, but that's what a lot of people think, they're saying. And the other big thing is that there's been a huge increase in fentanyl deaths in the past few years. So the proposal does a whole lot of different things. It would allow somebody who's arrested for shoplifting and has 2 past theft convictions to be charged with a felony instead of a misdemeanor if the total of all of their convictions is more than $950. So this is kind of a 3 strikes thing. So Prop 36 would also allow a person that provides drugs to someone and that person suffers a major injury, that the provider would get a longer prison term, and this includes psychedelic drugs. It would lengthen sentences if 3 or more people commit the crime together. So like these smash and grab, if there's groups of people, if there's 3 or more, they would get a higher sentence. Fentanyl would be added to California's list of hard drugs, which currently it is not. It has a program with someone who has 2 or more past drug convictions. The judge, they could be charged with a felony. The judge could decide either to send them to a drug or mental health treatment plan, and if the person went through the plan program and passed it successfully, they would get their conviction expunged. But if they decided that they didn't want to go to the program, they would just go directly to jail. And finally, the 36 would require that someone who is convicted of selling or providing drugs like fentanyl or cocaine, they would have to be given a warning that if the person who received the drugs dies as a result of the provider would be charged with murder. So the fiscal implication, the legislative analyst says that the state justice system costs would increase by low hundreds of millions of dollars a year because there would be an increase in prison population. And also court costs would increase because it costs a lot more to prosecute a felony than it does a misdemeanor. And the same would go for local jurisdictions. Local justice costs could increase because there would be more people in local jails, and because, again, it would cost a lot more to prosecute crimes. And also the amount of money, that $600 million that's been saved to go to programs to rehabilitate people, that money would be reduced. So some of those programs for the rehabilitation and victim services would also be reduced. So the supporters of Prop 36 include the California Retailers Association and a group called Californians for Safer Communities. They say that Prop 36 has tougher laws against the smash and grab thefts, and that's going to protect businesses. They say that it'll allow prosecutors to combine the value of multiple thefts to increase accountability for serial thieves, and they will reduce crime and substance abuse because it could mandate treatment for drug offenders. The opponents include the ACLU and the District Attorney of Contra Costa County. And opponents say that the law already requires felonies for smash and grab robberies and drug trafficking and repeat theft. And the purpose of 36 is just to put people in prison for unrelated crimes. They say that 36 will make California less safe because it reduces funding for rehabilitation and crime prevention and victim services. And Prop 36 would cost taxpayers billions to imprison more people without reducing crime. So the question is, should there be increases in sentencing for certain drug and theft crimes? $13 million has been raised in support of 36, and most of that money has come from Walmart, Macy's, and Stater Brothers. And the no, $3.2 million has been raised, and that's come from the ACLU and the Service Employees International Union. So questions on 36? Yeah, that's what they say. Well, they say, yes, it requires felonies for smash and grab robberies, drug trafficking, and repeated theft. So as far as I know, it's correct. Okay, we got through the state ones. Going to do a county one, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jean for another county one. So this, I'm going to do County Measure A. So County Measure A is an initiative, and it's an initiative sales tax. And it requires a simple majority to pass. So everybody got it? I don't know what page it's on. Okay. Page 8. Okay. So it's the subject of this, Measure A, is to increase the LA County sales tax to address homelessness and fund affordable housing. So we had a homeless count this year, 2024. We had 75,000 unhoused individuals in LA County. It's a little bit lower this year than it was last year, but only about 30% of the unhoused people are sheltered. So 30% of them have some kind of temporary shelter. The rest are just on the streets or whatever. So in 2017, we passed Measure H, County Measure H, and it got 70% of the vote, and it enacted a 10-year, 1/4 cent sales tax to fund affordable housing and homeless services, and Measure H will expire in 2027. So the proposal would repeal the 1/4 cent sales tax passed in 2017 and replace it with a permanent 1/2 cent sales tax. So it'd be a 1/4 cent increase in the sales tax. The funds would be used to create affordable housing and support home ownership, to provide rental assistance, and to increase mental health and addiction treatment, and provide services for people experiencing homelessness. And the tax would be permanent. It would continue until we voters decide to cut it out. And there would be audits and oversight of the use of the funds. So the fiscal implications for the county, it would raise approximately $1 billion a year for the homeless services. The supporters of Measure A include United Way, the ACLU, and the LA County Supervisors. And they say that Measure A will fund new affordable housing and interim and intermediate housing. They say that it will fund mental health and substance abuse treatment for homeless people, that it'll provide rental or legal assistance for tenants who are at risk of eviction, and it provides greater accountability than Measure H. The opponents include the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association and former Supervisor Mike Antonovich, and the LA County Business Federation, and they say we haven't gotten our money's worth from Proposition H. And there's still been a 37% increase in homelessness since 2017. They say that doubling the tax now will just hurt people that are struggling already. They say that we're just rushing into this because there's still 3 years left on Measure H, so why are we doing this now? And they say that the proposed tax is forever. And so the question is, should the LA County sales tax be raised by 1/4 cent to fund homelessness services and affordable housing? And unfortunately, the county doesn't have a website like the state does that tells who's donating money and how much. So I can't tell you where the money's coming from for supporters and opponents. But any questions? Okay, Jean is going to do County Measure E.
So County Measure E, it pertains to fire and emergency services in in the places where LA County Fire provides the services, which includes unincorporated areas. So a lot of league members live in Altadena. Guess what? That's us. Pasadena provides its own. So they don't require LA County. There are, it said 59 cities that contract with LA County, however. So this is it's an initiative. It was put on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors. It requires 50% plus 1 of the votes cast to pass. It is a parcel tax to raise funds for county services. The LA County Fire provides services to unincorporated areas of the county. In addition, 59 incorporated cities have chosen to contract for services with LA County Fire rather than establish their own fire departments. Now the fire department is funded through a portion of your property taxes. However, this does not seem to have kept up with the needs of the fire department. So the proposal is Measure E would levy a 6 cents per square foot tax on certain improvements on each parcel. Parking areas are excluded, and only residents within the LA County Fire Service area would pay that parcel tax. It could go up by 2% per year. The funds would be used to hire and train firefighters and paramedics, upgrade, replace aging firefighter safety equipment, which includes fire engines, helicopters, facilities, life-saving rescue tools. And it says 911 communications technology. That includes the paramedics being able to communicate with a hospital and a doctor. Think about that. It also includes thermal imaging equipment so that firefighters can look in a place that's been burned or a rubble area to look for people. And it also includes, believe it or not, access to GPS mapping. We have it on our phones and we have it in our cars. We live with it. We have lived with it for 20 years anyway. So they need this in order to have quick responses to our needs. This levy would continue until ended by voters, so it's indefinite. Exemptions could be made for low-income seniors, and there would be independent oversight of the funds. So fiscal implications. The levy would raise about $152 million annually. Supporters. So we have the Democratic Party, the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and firefighters, and Assembly Member Freddie Rodriguez, and a paramedic. So Measure E will upgrade the county's aging 911 system to improve communications and response time, and more paramedics and firefighters will be hired and trained. And opponents, Howard Jarvis Tax Association, former LA County Supervisor Mike Antonovich, and the Republican Party, and a writer for LA City Watch, Jack Humphreyville. They say that this is a tax that would increase every year, which it does allow a 2% upgrade every year. If the supervisors manage their budget better, they could pay for this without a tax increase. So what is the question? Should LA County levy a tax of 6 cents per square foot of certain partial improvements to fund fire and other emergency services? A yes vote means yes, you approve of the parcel tax, and no means you do not. And I want to add in there, I looked up what certain means. Certain parcel improvements, and everything just says certain. One place did I find that it meant if you do, say, an addition on your house, then the tax is on you. It says 6 cents per square foot on certain parcel improvements. Then you don't pay the extra 6 cents.
You're saying that, like,
That's what it looks like. No tax.
no tax, all right.
On the other hand, our firemen need it too. Jeez. My God. They do so much. Yeah. No. So it's only in affected areas. Correct.
Correct. An improvement means whatever structure or building is on that property, whether, but it's a square footage. So if you make an improvement to your house, but it doesn't increase the square footage, then you would not pay additional tax. But the tax would apply to any building that's on that property. And so, but not parking. No, only the people in the affected areas vote on it. Correct, it's not on my ballot. I looked, because this isn't, yeah, she wanted to know, aren't they, cities that do a contract with LA County Fire, aren't they already paying? And this is in addition to whatever they would be paying. But again, this only people that live in the affected areas are voting on this, and they are the only ones who would be paying the tax, the parcel tax. Okay, one more, we're almost done, yay. County Measure G. And these are charter amendments. The LA County Charter is like their constitution. And these were put on the ballot by a majority of the county supervisors. This would do multiple amendments to the county charter. So when California was founded back in 1849, I guess, they set up a system for the counties and governments, and the state law says that California counties have 5 supervisors, unless they decide to create their own county charter. Well, LA County decided to create its own charter in 1912, but it kept that 5 supervisor number. In 1912, LA County had a population of 500,000. Now it's over 10 million. So each supervisor represents more than 2 million people. So in the 1970s, there was a study that recommended ways to improve county government. And one of the recommendations was to increase the size of the Board of Supervisors to 9 members, and also to create an elected county executive. Right now we have a county executive. That person is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And this would kind of mirror federal and state government structures with balance of powers, because then you would have an elected executive branch, and then you would have an elected legislative branch. So the Board of Supervisors is the legislative branch, and the executive is the executive branch. So it's this kind of separation of powers and balance of power. There have been several ballot measures that have been on the ballot in the past years, and they've all failed, and mostly because of concerns over expenses. So the measure, Proposition G, LA County Measure G, would create an elected county executive by 2028. So 4 years from now. It would replace the current appointed executive. It would increase the size of the Board of Supervisors from 5 members to 9 members. However, this could not happen until at least 2032. And the reason for that is we can't redraw districts until you have a census. And the next census isn't until 2030. So we would have the census in 2030, and then sometime between 2030 and 2032, the California Redistricting Commission would redraw the districts, and then we could have an election to elect the 9 supervisors. So it's at least like 8 years off. Measure G would create an independent ethics commission for the county. It would establish a nonpartisan legislative analyst, and this is again a person who analyzes fiscal effects of ballot measures and things. And it would require county departments to present annual budgets to public meetings. And the big thing about Proposition or Measure G is that it would all have to be done within existing funding sources. So the fiscal implications, money implications, proposed changes would have to be done with existing administrative and departmental funds. No new taxes, but again, if you've got these extra expenses, something's going to have to be cut somewhere. So the supporters of Measure G include Supervisors Lindsay Horvath, Janice Hahn, and Hilda Solis. So the majority of 3 voted to put this on the ballot, and a couple of political science professors from Pomona and Loyola Marymount, and they said that Measure G will increase local representation because there's 9 smaller supervisorial districts, and so that the supervisors will better reflect their community. They say there's going to be increased checks and balances, but with this elected executive, and that person can manage all of these county departments. They say that it will clean up corruption by establishing an ethics commission to root out waste. And they say it will be implemented with no new taxes. The opponents include 2 supervisors, Catherine Barger and Holly Mitchell. And LA County firefighters are against this, and they say the elected county executive will have no term limit, unlike the supervisors. They say that there are no requirements in the measure for experience or competence with this new county executive, but that person will be expected to manage 30 departments with a $45 billion budget. That's our county budget, $45 billion. They say that Measure G creates 5 new managerial positions plus staff, and that's going to be paid for by taking money from other essential programs, and that Measure G does nothing to address pressing county issues like homelessness and the decaying LA County Jail. So the question is, should the LA County Charter be amended to create an elected county executive to increase the number of supervisors from 5 to 9, and then the other changes I've mentioned? So a yes vote means you think we should make these changes, and a no vote means you don't. So any questions on this one? I think we're done. Yeah. I guess we had a question. Oh,
I have one question going back to state measure 2.
Measure 2, okay, she has a question on Prop 2. Okay, the question is, are there special provisions for smaller districts? There is one special provision that says that for a small district, the state would pay a larger share of project costs. So usually they pay 50%. For the smaller districts, the state would pay 55% of the project costs. So there is that provision. And any other question? Yeah, it's under the Secretary of State. I think it's called CAL-Access. Cal Access, and it's under the Secretary of State's website, and that they update that on a regular basis. Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, the leagues. Yeah, the state measures. If you go to the state league website, which is LWVC, League of Women Voters California, lwvc.org, and look under, I think it's under elections, and there's a thing that says vote with the league, and it will tell you the positions and why we took them. Okay, the question is about 6 and the people not being, having to work or be punished. And my opinion or my guess is that it applies to all prisons, whether they're private or public.
Oh, okay, so there are some that are private and then some that are public.
But I assume it would apply to any prison in California. It would apply to no matter who owns them or runs them. Yeah, yes, the Cal Matters website's a good, yeah. No, I have not. But all I can say is that Prop 2, the bonds, they're all paid through from the state general fund. So I'm having a hard time seeing how that connects with local property taxes. It doesn't. So I would not think that Prop 2 has any effect on property taxes, your local property taxes. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I'll take a look. Like I could learn something. So any other questions on anything? Yeah. Nope. Simple majority. Well, the state ones, this bond measure, Prop 2, is just a simple majority. The 2 state ones that we have, 2 and 4, are both simple majority. But local ones can be higher. So, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Karen.
Thank you, Robbie. I am just impressed with how smart we all are. Okay, we have a few announcements before we're done. One is, Dorothy, do you want to come up and talk about the postcards?
We do not only education, but we do advocacy as well. And the advocacy director isn't here today, and I'm a mere substitute. And that I'd like to share with you. Every day, and this isn't news to us, every day the freedom to vote is under attack. Since the 2012 Supreme Court decision in the Shelby County and Holder gutted the Voting Rights Act, at least 29 states have passed 94 laws that make it harder to vote, with the burden falling hardest on Black voters and other voters of color. We need a fully restored Voter Rights Act to defend our democracy and protect the freedom to vote. That is why at your place we have these cards with our wonderful person, John R. Lewis. And we need to fully restore the Voter Rights Act. That is why the League is proud to support the reintroduction of H.R. 14 and S4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, vital legislation that is needed to fully restore and modernize the Voter Rights Act and ensure that discriminatory voting policies are stopped in their tracks, unlike this year. Tell your members of Congress, please, to protect the freedom to vote and support the passage of the John L. Lewis Voter Rights Advancement Act. and you have a card at your place with what everybody loves, these QR codes, and you could take that right now, you can take out your phone and take a picture of the QR code, and I have done that. So I'm taken to the League of Women Voters national site. And there's very little to read. We don't like to read a lot. But what it does have is an area where you're going to enter your information, your name, your address, etc. And then it will take you so you don't even have to look up who your representative is. It's going to tell you who they are. And then there's something to say that, yes, you are for them voting again for the Voter Rights Act. So please do that before you leave, or in your car, or while you're having lunch. But don't miss it. Thank you.
Could I add one quick comment to that?
You may.
Really quickly, because I know you have to get out. Many people are probably thinking, oh, well, my representative, Judy Chu, for example, is already supporting voting rights. That doesn't matter. Contact your representative, and if you know they support the right to vote, thank them for doing so and urge them to keep doing it. They still need to hear from you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, the first thing I wanted to mention is I got some information from one of our members, George Null, who runs the special interest group in Altadena. And George isn't here because they got COVID before they got out of Missouri. But they asked me to put these on the table and I forgot, so I'm going to put them in the handouts in the back. And it's a notice about the Prop 36 proposition. They're going to have an in-depth kind of dialogue about Prop 36 and, to really learn about trends in and strong connections between California homelessness, drug addiction, mental health, and incarceration. And they're going to talk about the desirability and effectiveness of the proposed Prop 36 coerced drug addiction treatment and its potential effect on homelessness. So I'm going to put these in the back. The meeting is on October the 18th at George and Cynthia Knoll's house in Altadena, and your members are invited. Thank you. Okay, so the next thing is to let you know about our next event, which is next week, October 17th, and it's entitled Civil Discourse, Dialogue Across Differences. It will be hosted at All Saints Episcopal Church. They've been very generous to allow us to come and host it there. And it would be helpful if you register for it, but you don't have to. We just like the registration because it gives us a head count for the snacks. Okay? Okay, so the last thing.
And there's a handout on the table.
Yeah, there's a handout of it, if they're still there. There's a lot of people here. The last thing we wanted to mention is the voter services had a reminder. Pardon? Oh, that one I didn't even go for, sorry. Yes, there's a save the date, November 23rd, and it should be really interesting on the Electoral College. Okay, the voter services reminds us, right up there, 10 days to register. If you don't register within 10 days, you can register at the polling place, at your polling place. If you're voting at the polling place, take your mail-in ballot with you. Host a ballot party to discuss the ballot issues and assure informed voters exist. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is if you have questions and don't know who to ask, we will have a voter hotline beginning Saturday, November 2nd. And it will run through Election Day. So if you really get stuck and you need to know what resource to contact, you can contact us at the Pasadena League office, and we will help guide you, okay?
We still need volunteers.
Oh, and we need volunteers for that. There's a training, I think, in later October, there are 2 trainings, so 2 possible trainings. So we really, everybody that has volunteered so far for all these events have been so generous with their time and energy, and we really could use a few more people. Okay? All right. So at this point, I just want to thank you all for being here, for your, Dorothy shared those. Isn't it?
No, not these. She didn't.
Oh, there are new ones?
There are old ones. They're back, just on the back table.
Oh, okay. There's some, Joan tells me that there are some postcards on the back table that,
Yeah, this
and
one is
materials.
411,
Okay,
and
okay.
anyway. these-
Thank you. I thought it was the same postcard that Dorothy had. Okay, well, thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Yes? Yes, and they suggested that you wear purple when you go there, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great week. We hope to see you on the 17th.